But first to Beijing, where there's no end to the conflict, the intrigue, I should say, surrounding the escape of dissident Chen Guangcheng, with supporters of the activist now confident he will be taken to the United States. Mr. Chen's case looks certain to dominate a visit to China later this week by US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. The White House and Mrs. Clinton have remained tight-lipped on the Chen case, but it's put the spotlight back on US-China relations, with Republican presidential contender Mitt Romney weighing in. Professor Geoffrey Garrett is head of the US Studies Centre and also Dean of the Business School at the University of Sydney. Geoffrey Garrett, thanks very much for joining us.
My pleasure, Jim.
A presidential election in the United States, a leadership transition in China. This is a particularly difficult time, I would have thought, to manage relations between such long-standing antagonists.
I think that's right, Jim, but, you know, if I was looking forward, what I would say is I wouldn't expect too much big in US-China relations, either positive or negative. Both sides are just going to try to keep the status quo going, I think.
That may go for the incumbents, but what about the insurgents, if I can put it that way? Relations between the United States and China have featured in a number of presidential elections, going back, in fact, to the 1940s. Do current developments, do you think, suggest it's going to figure prominently in this year's presidential race?
Well, Mitt Romney, obviously on the Republican side, had to run pretty far to the right to win the Republican nomination, as he's now going to do. We'd normally expect him now to run towards the centre for the general election, and then I think when in office, probably foreign policy wouldn't be so different under a Romney or an Obama administration. Of course, where China's concerned, that's where some of Romney's toughest talk has been. It's mostly been about economics and, you know, exchange rates, where he wants to play the China card, China bashing card, to say that Obama hasn't done enough about unemployment in the US. But, you know, if we look at it in reality, the RMB's appreciated 35 or 40% against the US dollar, and so the criticisms just don't look so well-founded.
Nevertheless, this is a particularly sensitive time. Hillary Clinton's on her way, or just about to be on her way to China for annual talks with the Chinese leadership. It's come just as the Chen Guangcheng case has emerged. This does make things much more difficult, and I suspect that's indicated, is it not, by the fact that neither the President nor the Secretary of State have been prepared to comment directly on this case in the lead-up to these talks?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, Secretary Clinton is part of the strategic and economic dialogue. You know, literally she's leading half of the US cabinet to talk with counterparts in China. It's a really big diplomatic initiative on both sides. Of course, human rights are always tough. The Chen case is looking really difficult. What I'd imagine is going on at the moment is both sides are working really hard on a deal that they can both live with, and then there'll be a public statement. You know, Kurt Campbell, the Assistant Secretary for East Asia, went before Hillary Clinton. He's trying to work it hard. I don't think the US at the moment wants to embarrass China. You know, I think 2 years ago, Hillary Clinton said that there were more important things than human rights in US-China relations. She took some flack for that, but I think underneath the surface that's still the view of the Obama administration.
Is there a danger, though, that unless the US, that is the Obama administration, can achieve a result where Mr. Chen is either released and allowed to go to the United States or released back into the Chinese community under terms which give him guarantees of freedom from persecution, that is really very easy meat for the Republicans to suggest that it's either a defeat for President Obama or he is yet again soft on China?
Yeah, I think you're right. You know, the Romney strategy in general on foreign policy is to say that Obama is too weak. He's too weak to be a leader of the country and of the free world. You're right that a bloody kind of outcome, a messy outcome here, would not look very good for Obama. But I think that Romney understands, because American big business understands, that today the really big issues in US-China relations are the economic ones, where American multinational firms want things like intellectual property protection. They want market access. Absolutely, following Obama's speech in Australia, he's going to say that human rights are not only American values, they're universal values, and China should accede to them. But I think that that kind of posturing is going to conceal what's going to happen behind the scenes in this case, which is that it's in both the US's interests and China's interests for an outcome, a nice, quiet resolution to this case that both sides can be comfortable with. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that's clearly where the incentives lie for both countries.
Is there a danger that in the lead up to the presidential election, as you say, Mitt Romney is going to head towards the centre, because that's what Republicans do once the primaries are over, in a bid to maximise votes, but it also, in a sense, forces President Obama to the right in trying to head off the Republicans' bid for the centre, and that therefore his rhetoric on China has to be tougher than it would otherwise be.
I think you're exactly right, and that's how I would read Obama's speech in Canberra to the Parliament last year, where he said things like human rights they're not American rights, they're not Western rights, they're universal rights, and then also said that prosperity without freedom is another form of poverty. Those were talking tough statements by Obama, which were really, just saying that we have fundamental worldview differences with the Chinese. And, that's a reality. I'm not going to sugarcoat it at all. But I think that the incentives for Obama, as with the Chinese leadership, are still to manage the relationship. And we should view statements like those from Obama really as pressure release valves. They're a way to take some of the air out of an anti-China balloon, somewhat paradoxically maybe, and my sense is that the Chinese leadership understands that.
Fair enough. Geoffrey Garrett, once again, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure, Jim.